Hi everyone, I'm Literary Freak 11, and this is going to be a dedicated review and only the second one that I've done on my channel so far. Please ignore the sound of crickets. I was hoping they'd be quieter, but they are right next to my filming location. So, I would like to talk about the book This Is Not the End, and this is a positive review, whereas the other one was kind of a rant. I really enjoyed this book. There are so many aspects that I want to talk about because there were so many interesting things. So the first half of this review is going to be spoiler free. For those of you who don't know what this book is about, it is a book that's a little bit sci-fi, but mostly reads as a young adult contemporary about this girl who, her best friend and her boyfriend are in a car with her, and they die in a car accident, and she survives. And in this universe, on your 18th birthday, you can choose one person to resurrect. Science has made it possible, and that's really the only sci-fi aspect of this book. It's kind of more like a thought experiment, and essentially she has to choose which one of them she's going to resurrect. Now, I personally had a problem with the fact that you only get one day to resurrect someone, because when you're 18, most people don't know anyone who has passed away of something other than old age, and for me, the only person who, when I was 18, hadn't passed away was, other than old age, was my Aunt Janice, who passed away when I was 2, and, maybe I could have used my resurrection on her, but, I know her, and you do need to have a body. So basically what it does is it regenerates all of the cells. But this book was so interesting. The main character, her name is Lake, and she has a brother who's quadriplegic, and actually the book starts talking about her picturing her brother's accident where he had fallen out of a tree that he was climbing to read or whatever, and that's how the book starts. It doesn't start with the death of her best friend and her boyfriend. So there's this whole interesting dynamic that results from the death of her best friend and her boyfriend, and, she goes to their houses separately. She goes first to her boyfriend's house, and, the parents have her for dinner, and she also feels very excluded from her own family. She feels like, because of the fact that her brother is a quadriplegic, and it takes so much effort for him to go to do anything really, that she has kind of been sidelined, that they're in on something that she isn't, and that she just feels very excluded by them. And so these people's parents have really become like second families to her. So she goes to dinner at the boyfriend's house, Will, and basically they're just like, hey, so you're going to use your resurrection on our son, right? And her mother was supposed to go with her, but because of her feeling disconnected with her family, she didn't want her mother to go. But in the end, she's like, yeah, you're right, you should have gone with me. And then Penny is Jewish. Well, her family's Jewish, but Penny is not at all religious or connected. She's kind of like a spiritualist, earthy girl. And so because of her family being Jewish, they go to Shiva, and that scene was done so well, and that was the point where I cried in this book. She meets Penny's Grandma Adler, who she's met previously, and Grandma Adler's ranting about how, they didn't tell her that that Penny had died because of the fact that in Judaism you're supposed to bury a dead body as soon as possible. And so she's talking about how it's desecrating the dead and stuff like that, but she says it in Hebrew. And for those of you who don't know, there are two types of Jews. There are the types of Jews that will interject random Hebrew words into their English dialogue and not explain it to the non-Jews they're talking to, and there's the type that do. And the grandmother is the former, who just doesn't explain anything, and if you happen not to be Jewish, you don't know anything, basically. But I just thought that it was so realistically done. And Lake's mom goes up to her and says, there's a phrase in Hebrew that you say to people who are mourning and she says it in Hebrew in the audiobook, and I thought that was really cool, really realistic, and very powerful, and I absolutely loved that scene. So then you get her meeting Ringo, who is going to this like therapist's office that she's going to, and they were in elementary school together, I think. And so they begin talking. He has like a scar around his face. And it's funny because he's like, oh, why are you here in therapy? And she tells him, and then she's like, well, why are you here? And he's like, what? That's way too personal. And he like doesn't tell her. And it's kind of cute. And so then they end up becoming friends. And I guess I'm going to start spoilers here. But basically, she leans emotionally on him way too hard as a crutch, which ends up breaking their friendship / relationship / whatever's going on. But then the other aspect of this book that I just, like, it's all over the place because there are all these different threads, and so it's hard to, like, go from one chronologically through this book as you follow all the threads. So one of the things that happens is that Will has planned, like, a super, birthday scavenger hunt for her birthday, and he's already laid the clues. So she happens to find out about it, and then she's looking for the clue, and her older brother Matt, who by the way is like a very abrasive person, burned it, and she's like, what? That's like the last thing that I have of my boyfriend, how could you do that? But he burned it before Will was dead, so, but even still, obviously not nice. Matt says, I'll tell you the clue, I memorized it, but you have to promise to take me to every stop on the scavenger hunt. And she's like, fine. And so they do, and one of the things that I really liked about this is that she really learns how hard his life is because, they have a van, and like loading him into the van is hard. They actually end up going to a restaurant where Will and Lake had a date. There's no like handicapped entrance, and so really you get to see what this struggle is. And so this is another like big spoiler right here, is that they want him to die, and they have these like death parties where you die and then on someone's 18th birthday, someone resurrects you the next day. Oh yeah, that was the other aspect of the book that I found really unrealistic. It's like, it would seem really, really obvious, oh, you die and someone resurrects you the next day, which is kind of trying to be prevented by society, so death parties are like very hush-hush. But at the same time, I feel like it's almost like an insurance policy, right? Where you're not going to get the payout if your store burns down unless they can prove that you didn't set the fire yourself to claim the money. And so I just feel like it would definitely be investigated, like the Resurrection Bureau might have an investigative body that makes sure that you're not just like dying for the sake of resurrection, in which case, like, it should definitely be more of a gamble. But anyway, her brother is also an option on the table, but not an option that she wants because he's been pushing her away, and he's generally like abrasive and rude and mean. For most of the book. And so, but I think that part of the reason he wants her to take him is so that she can kind of see how hard his life is. But then you have Ringo, and they kind of like meet all of his friends, and it's like this kind of cool crowd of people. One of them is a tech hacker, and this becomes important because there's this jock kind of guy mentions to Lake that she saw this thread on this anonymous group posting website that he thinks Will was on, talking to another person, and the conversation, and she goes back and she finds this, and the conversation consists of how this person who she's pretty sure is Will, she actually like goes into his room, takes his computer, and sees if the messages are from him, and they are, and then she just needs to figure out who the other person is. But it's kind of like this whole thing about how he doesn't feel like a genuine person, and he feels like he's pretending, but at the same time his father, who I guess walked out on the family, was just such a bad figure that he didn't want to be like his father. And I absolutely like love this aspect, and in the end this is one of the reasons that she chooses not to resurrect him. And the whole book you don't really know who she's going to resurrect. Definitely times where you think she's leaning towards Penny, there are definitely times you think she's leaning towards Will. So in that conversation it turns out that the other person that she was talking to was Penny, and that they were kind of falling in love behind Lake's back. And this is definitely one of the factors that leads her to resurrecting neither of them. But the truth is that that was definitely the right choice, because Will obviously didn't really like her that way, but at the same time, if she resurrected him, it would only be to let him go, but he would feel beholden to her. He would feel like he had to continue this sham of a relationship in order to, pay her back for resurrecting him. And also, she feels like if she resurrected Penny, it would go against like this naturalist vibe that she has. Resurrection is considered unnatural. And this is a whole debate in the society that I really, really enjoyed. So you have people like Penny's parents who actually offer to pay for Lake's resurrection choice to get their daughter back, which is also illegal. And then, you have people who are like trying to convince her, and like the world around this girl goes absolutely nuts because Will's family shows up at Penny's family shiva, and they just duke it out, really relying on this choice. And so basically, but she thinks that one of the other things that happens is that they go to this commune where people who have been resurrected live. And one of the things that was really interesting about this is like they're kind of like these hippies, they're vegan, all this stuff, and they take on different names because they feel like they're different people spiritually. So she's like, yeah, but would Penny really like this? And she ends up not resurrecting her either. Towards the end of the book, her brother has a death day party, and she gets really drunk, and she leaves before he actually, drives into the river, or the pond, or whatever it is that he was going to drive his wheelchair into. And so she calls Ringo, even though he's mad at her because she obviously has been using him, and he shows up, and she's already passed out in the backseat, so she wakes up, and he's there, like, sleeping in her car, basically. And so they drive, and she gets home, and she finds a note from her brother, and it's like, look, I know I screwed up, I'm hiding somewhere because I don't want you to use your resurrection choice on me, because while I wasn't there for you, Penny and Will were, and I want you to resurrect one of them, which was just, such good character development, although it did kind of feel a little bit sudden. And eventually, and so she ends up really liking Ringo, so the end is them kind of, on the beach, watching the sunset, and she's finally accepting that she's not going to resurrect either of her friends, even though she loves them dearly. But she also acknowledges that the two families whoever she picked, they would be enemies forever, and one family would hate her and the other would love her, and she didn't want that. And she acknowledges, she's like, look, this family, they'll be friends now, and they might even be best friends because of the fact that I made this choice. And I think that it was the right choice, and I really, really just loved everything about this society. So the final thing that I wanted to talk about, I think, is the fact that in this society, you see this subset of people who view and treat resurrection in various different ways. So you have the people who obviously support it, the people who are against it for religious or moral reasons, or naturalist reasons. And then you have the people, and then Ringo, who ends up being a really important character because he tells her, it's like, this will not solve all your problems. His mom was staunchly against resurrection, but when his mom passed away when he was a kid, he resurrected her because, you know, what are you going to do that to Mom? And because of that, his mom hates him, like absolutely hates him, like will leave him at therapy for, you know, hours instead of picking him up, not because she can't, but because she's mad at him for resurrecting her. And so you have this dynamic where he's like, look, this isn't going to solve your problems that existed before they passed away, and it might just make it worse. You know, you don't know whether this person is going to be happy with your choice, and so there's really nothing that you can do, and you really, you know, have to take in that person into account, because it does feel like a selfish thing to like. When you're 18, you're still like a little bit selfish sometimes. And so the choice to resurrect someone, and Lake is of course very not that way, but I feel like a lot of people could be where like Ringo, they'll resurrect someone for their own purposes because they need that person, not because that's what that person wants. And so I think that that is a very, very interesting thing, and I love that resurrection doesn't solve your problems. You know, it's not this magical solution to everything. And finally, the end when you discover that Lake has been resurrected. And so this part, I like, you know, I was shocked. I did not realize. And there's definitely allusions to it because there's definitely this gap in her memory. And she changes schools and stuff like that so that people, you know, wouldn't know. She, I think, is mad. Her mom catches her kissing a boy when she's like 14 or something. And she goes outside. She's walking across this pier and there's a massive storm and the waves take her and she drowns. And Matt, her brother, basically jumps in to save her. And the family decide, and he uses his resurrection on her. That's how he becomes a quadriplegic, but he uses his resurrection on her. And she figures this out because she looks at family portraits and realizes that she had like a mole or a birthmark or something on her face. And when she turns 14, she looks at her like 13-year-old school picture versus her 14-year-old school picture. She realizes it's gone because what the resurrection does is it makes everything like perfect. Like, your skin is flawless again. It's a total reset. And so she's like, holy crap, I'm resurrected. But her family never told her. But that, in the same time, because they all had the secret that they knew and she didn't, they ended up excluding her. But she realizes that the way that people who think that they're different after they've been resurrected or any of that stuff, she's like, that's all bullshit. Because, I grew up like a normal person. I just didn't know that I was resurrected. And so it's really all a societal thing that people put on people who have been resurrected, or that resurrected people put on themselves. And I just thought that was really interesting. Again, this is kind of like this wonderful thought experiment. And I don't have enough good things to say about this book. Definitely read it if you haven't. And don't forget to follow me in social media, linked in the description below. And subscribe and like for more content on Fridays now.